This episode is brought to you by Lumina Growth Lab. At Lumina, we help professional learning and development companies who are struggling with predictable lead flow, a sniper approach to attracting the ideal clients, and a system that qualifies leads so they can have a smoother sales process, finally have scalability, and ultimately take their business to the next level. Most of the time, our clients come to us frustrated because nothing seems to work outside of word of mouth and referral based lead generation. But with the right strategy and support, they're able to confidently add new channels of lead gen with a packed pipeline that creates sustainable revenue and year over year growth for cheaper than ever before because of the use of AI technologies. If that sounds like you or someone you know, connect with me on LinkedIn and I'd be happy to have a conversation with you about unlocking your business's potential. Now, let's dive into today's episode. Welcome to the Marketing Matrix. I'm your host, Lisanne Murphy, and today I am joined by the wonderful, talented Meryl Eriksen. Meryl, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Guys, I am really excited to have this powerhouse of a woman. We had an opportunity to not just talk about her passions in the business world, but also she's a gardener, guys. And so we've bonded on that as well. And so I feel very, very privileged and lucky to have someone that I feel a professional and personal connection to. And so I want to take a moment to introduce this powerhouse woman and give her a chance to share a little bit more about what she does in her story. So Meryl Eriksen is a compassionate leadership expert, speaker, and entrepreneur who is helping organizations and individuals reimagine what it means to lead with purpose and love. Meryl is the Chief Compassion Officer at Compassionate Leaders Circle, where she designs and delivers programs that strengthen culture, elevate potential, and build leaders who inspire real connection. With a background in hospitality and business development, and as a graduate of Cornell's Hotel School, she brings both rigor and heart to her work, blending strategy, science, and soul. She's also the founder of Pink Pineapple Cooking, a venture that brings people together through the joy of food and community. Where she's in the kitchen, on stage, or in the boardroom, Meryl's mission is clear: to help people lead with love, discover their unique purpose, and create workplaces where everyone can thrive. I love that. So, guys, wherever you are, give a big round of applause to Meryl. Again, Meryl, thank you so much for coming on the Marketing Matrix today.
So I'm so happy to be here.
Okay, so give us a little bit of background, like how you had this shift from hospitality to leadership. And even as I'm saying it, I don't even know that there was really that much of a shift, just like a different application.
Totally.
But but talk to me about like where this passion for leadership development started for you and how you got to where you are today.
So I spent the majority of my career with one company called the Inns of Aurora. And the woman who founded American Girl Doll is the owner of this company. And she is a powerhouse and just like a visionary person. And so I worked for her for 13 years. And what I loved about it was I had all this opportunity to try new things, which as someone sort of young in my was in sort of my 20s and 30s, learning how to contribute to an organization. And I had a chance to lead tons and tons of people. And I'm really good at it. And it was very natural for me. And I say that in the sense that, I sort of ended up with a very large team of people working for me and being able to talk to them on a day-to-day basis and know about their kids and hear about their lives and all these things, matter from a leadership development standpoint. And when I decided to move on from that career, I have 3 young children, and so was looking for something less work, honestly, and more time at home. And so I went through a program with Compassionate Leader Circle called Purpose Lab. And Purpose Lab is about helping individuals find what is meaningful, joyful, and allows them to leave their mark in their own sort of passionate way in the world. And so I got about halfway through this program, and the CEO said, "I want you to work for me." And I was like, "I don't know anything about leadership." And she's like, "What? You spent the last 20 years of your career leading teams." Not theoretical study of leadership, right? It's not like you have this degree in, and degrees are wonderful, but there's also like real life practicality in terms of like, how do you do this when you have someone who's going through a challenge or you are? How do you motivate? And so for me, it was just like you said, sort of a shift in perspective and like how I was delivering that messaging and what I was doing. And sort of at the same time that I joined Compassionate Leader Circle, I have this deep love and need to sort of nourish people, nourish plants, nourish whatever. And so I started another company called Pink Pineapple Cooking where I teach kids, teens, and adult cooking classes in my community. They're live in person classes, very small, but have a really big impact on the people learning about food and how to cook for themselves and know what's good for their bodies. And so had these sort of two nourishing things that I'm doing. One is sort of in your boardroom, in your organization with people, and this other is sort of with kids and with my garden and with food. And like, how do those things intertwine? But it's really sort of deeply related to nourishing all of those things so that they can grow. They can have confidence, they have connection, and like really inspiring joy, sort of in a lot of levels.
Um, I would love for you from your work and study and perspective, like what is compassion? Can you like define compassion? Because I think it's a word that's kind of misunderstood. And
Yeah.
then after you kind of share what your perspective is on like what compassion is, I'd love to like hear like feel the bridge between like what compassion has to do with nourishment. Because you talked about nourishment a lot and between like what you're doing professionally and I mean even the cooking is professional on a level, but like your personal
Different
passion.
avenues.
Right? So what is compassion and how is it related to nourishment?
So we define compassion as alleviating suffering, right, from people, really is how we define it at Compassion Leaders Circle. And that can be in a lot of different ways, right? We don't want people to go through periods of life or time where they are feeling suffering, right? In any way, right? That could be a lot of different directions. And so you think about nourishment as it pertains to alleviating suffering, it's like, well, if you nourish yourself, if you nourish your company, if you nourish these other things, you're pouring sort of this love and energy into something. And, maybe there's not a direct correlation. I would say there is, but if we're pouring all this love in, then nature of suffering goes down, right? Because we have this sort of open heart. A lot of times people like for their jobs, they get so just like clock in, do their job, clock out, and like moving on. And so how are we shifting that framework to be like, well, I want to pour more into my job because I love it and it brings me joy and it brings me some level of satisfaction, right? And like if people are satisfied and fulfilled, they're going to do a better job. And so, as you think about this nourishment, it's like, well, we're feeding something all of this energy. And when we're doing that, you're sort of removing a lot of that suffering because there's attention, there's love, there's care, there's listening. And so, in my mind, that's sort of how I would sort of connect them. But that's the first time anyone's asked me to connect those things together.
I like it. Well, I think your answer is beautiful, right? You know, I've done a lot of study in the Buddhist philosophy, right? And like the four noble truths all have to do with suffering. Which I think is really interesting because when you think when I think when most people think about Buddhism, it's about love and care and non-judgment, which it is. But like it always comes back to that like suffering exists, that it's possible for suffering to transform. Like that's like really what it comes down to. And so the fact that like you have this definition of alleviating suffering, right? But that like how you do that is like you pour love and nourishment into something. So I really appreciate you sharing that
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah.
So like what are the types of suffering that you alleviate in organizations?
Let's see. I would say so there's 2 big ones that I find, like, most common with our clients. The first one is about sort of culture control, and I don't know if that's the best word, but, and a lot of times companies start small, and then as they start to grow, it is very difficult to maintain the same level of culture with more people. And then we add in the complexity of a hybrid work environment or a entirely remote work environment where now you have to be so much more intentional about your culture and your connection with people because there is like not only a physical barrier but then there's also this technology in between everybody. And so I think maintaining culture in a way that feels stable and firm for growth is a huge challenge for people. And so that's like sort of the first thing that I think about. The other one is about, you know, just because somebody does a good job at their job does not mean that they have the skill set to be a good leader. And so figuring out at what point you should be giving your team members resources and training and tools to become leaders is something that is lacking in almost every organization I've worked with. And a lot of times companies recognize that. They're like, gosh, we promoted these people or we grew so fast. And now we have this sort of level of managers who did a great job and then we didn't give them skills. And now we're like, how do we help them be better and give them the people skills, not the technology, not the I'll call them the sort of technical skill set, but the skills of going, tell me what's happening with you and why your performance isn't where it used to be. Help me understand why you're not showing up to meetings. How whatever the conversation is, there's this challenge that that level of leader doesn't never taught those things. And so a lot of times companies are like, how do we rewind that or how do we adjust for that? And the reality is people take time. So you have to teach them. And some companies want to spend money on that and some don't. Some are like, we'll just keep going and we'll hire new people or we'll do whatever and we'll just like keep moving and that's fine. It's not a priority to them. But other companies who really going, we're trying to make this a sustainable organization and we want to keep our people, recognize the importance of ongoing leadership development, training, tools, feedback, those types of things.
Yeah, which I think I would imagine that because it's not, this is actually a topic that I'm personally passionate about is like these skills that you're talking about, the non technical tactile skills are things that are not taught typically in schools or family, right? And so for, leaders to see that there's a need for it when it's like not woven into like any of our societal culture, unless you're like spiritual. It's gotta be a tough, like, really needed.
It absolutely is a tough sell. And what I will say, I'll say there's sort of two groups of people or companies. One that falls into the like, wow, this is really the way that we're going to grow. And others who are like, we don't care. And we're not trying to persuade the people who don't care because I can't, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to turn the needle there. I'm not going to be able to change anything there. But for the people going, I'm looking for another way to approach my staff, my teams, my leaders. And we've tried these other things and they don't work, right? That's sort of the avenue that we land in. The other thing is we work with K through 12 kids, we work with schools and universities. And what's cool about that is you start to give people this type of language and idea at a much younger age. And so as they sort of navigate, moving from school to a career, whether that's high school to career or college to career, they have this sense of like who they are sort of deep in their self and what does it mean to connect with people. And I find that like college age, we work with Denver University quite a bit for a number of years we have, and they leave our sort of retreat weekend and the students are like, this is so amazing. And I never had this conversation. I've never developed these types of bonds with my classmates because, it's designed for people to really sort of dig deep into who they are. And then sort of you come out of it and going, okay, so what do I want to contribute? And how do I do that in a way that is sort of loving and very you or yourself?
I love that. So now is that like a nonprofit and part of what you do, or
No,
is that
it's
also
part
for
of the
profit?
it's the same organization. We've sort of toyed with doing a nonprofit at some point, and that may happen. 'Cause there's a lot of interest in the sort of teen programming, especially with the impact social media, right, is having on that age group of people. And so there's sort of this pressure, I'll call it, right? You want to do what your parents tell you. You're going to go to school where your friends are going. You're going to study the thing that makes you the most amount of money. And like, those are all fine. But if you want to have a happy and fulfilled life, you have to have some sort of foundation, right, that you're working with. And so you may take a job or do something that you don't love, and that's okay. But it should be a bridge, right, to the work that you do love. And so sort of and the bridge isn't always right, it's not linear. You and I know that. We've been through a number of careers, right? Sometimes you go backwards, sometimes you go down, sometimes you go up, then you go sideways, then you lay down and take a nap because you're tired, right? And so but for kids who are coming out of college or that age group, like for them, it's like, but it's just, we have to go straight in this line and follow this path. And it's like, well, that's not always the case. And also, you can be a gardener, Lisanne, like you and me. not professionally. I love it. It's joyful and passionate for me. And I can be a mom and I can be a professional, right? Like I can do all of those things. And I think it's hard for people to think that they can do everything, and you can't do everything, but like the things that really are fueling you should be part of your life. For me, it's gardening. I don't get paid to garden, but in fact, I probably spend more money than I make on the garden. But like, it is a joyful experience for me to be out working with my hands in the sun and in the dirt. And so, just sort of allowing people to think outside the traditional box of what a professional self looks like is a great way to just restructure the way our brains are trained.
Yeah, and I think that that's a really important exercise as well. I had a gentleman on my podcast recently who was talking about how one of the activities that he does with his work is he has people write down like what are the things that bring you joy, like just for the sake of doing it, not because it like yields monetary benefit. And if it has monetary benefit, then that's fine. But like, what do you just love to do for the sake of just doing it? And like writing, the challenge is to like write down 10 things. And then he said, "Okay, now when was the last time you did all of these or like each of these things? Like not like all in the same day necessarily, but like when was the last time you engaged in this activity?" And he specializes in burnout and well, it's one of the things that he does. And people are always amazed that they're like, "Oh my gosh, like it's been months or years since I've engaged in this activity that like really means a lot to me." And so I love that focus that you bring in terms of like you can have multiple facets of your life. Like you need to incorporate elements of passion and drive because it's what makes life fulfilling and interesting as well. And so yeah, I love that you're speaking into that.
I think that is such an amazing exercise because I do think that we forget as we sort of spin into life, right? It's like you take the next job, then you whatever, get married, you move, you buy a house, you do, on and on and on. You get on the wheel and we just sort of crank through everything. And so taking time to write down things that are joyful or spend time thinking about gratitude, there's all these ways to sort of recenter yourself to like what's happening right now in your life and where are you, and they can change, right? It's not something that is written in stone. Like my purpose now is very different than it was 20 years ago when I was building a career and learning. And while I'm still learning, I have so much more knowledge and capability and experience that my goals are very different and my purpose is very different. And that's okay, right? And even my purpose from 3 years ago is different than it is today. And so just knowing that those things shift and change, it's fine, but those are amazing exercises to sort of go, wait a minute, what's happened? There's a million things going on. And like, let's just take a minute to focus on me. And I think, one of the other things that's really impactful for me is when I left my job, my sort of traditional corporate job, I like really probably took 6 months of like, and I hadn't done that. The times I did that were when I was on maternity leave after my kids were born. And like, that's a whole different level of tired, right? It's not mentally tiring, it's physically draining. And so I thought to myself, when's the last time you actually spent any time thinking about what you want? And like, what are the goals in 10 years? And where are you going? And so I feel really lucky and I recognize that as a privilege to be able to spend time thinking about that. But there are ways to do that on a smaller scale, right? And just 3 or 10 exercises of things you love and just reflecting on that.
Yeah. I love that so much. And yeah, so at the time of this recording, so yesterday was my birthday. And I intentionally like made it a day where like I had like nothing until dinner.
Yay!
Like
Happy
just
birthday.
thank you so much. I turned the big 4-1, so that was exciting.
Amazing.
And yeah, so I spent time, in meditation and writing and sitting out in the sun and eating my food way more slowly than I usually do. Yeah, it was a beautiful day for me. And yeah, I think that it's so important. Like I love how you say like it's a privilege to be able to do those things. And I think that it is, but I also think that it's I don't know, I mean, people might get mad at me for saying this, but I think it's almost an obligation as well. Like it's a privilege, but like it's something we owe ourselves and it doesn't necessarily need to be like an entire day, but taking moments for connection and silence with ourselves, I think is really, really important for our mental health and our ability to actually make a meaningful contribution in the world and not just get lost in that hamster wheel that you're talking about.
And imagine if you could apply that to an organization, right? And that for us is where sort of this specialty of what we do is so critical is that, going into a company and going, can we just slow down for a minute? And I know we have to sort of slow down to speed up, right? Like that's a term that's sort of thrown around a lot, but in a meeting or when's the last time you said to your team, I want you to take the afternoon to think? Because how are you going to grow and get better if people aren't being innovative and leaving space for your brain to go down the rabbit hole or go into the sky or go? Those types of things don't come through AI, right? Like comes from your own self thinking and being present. And so bringing that into an organization is a different way to manage people, right? And to think about how you're inspiring them and what you're doing, to yes, fulfill them, but also give them space to really grow and have an impact. And if you don't have the brain power or the space or the time, you're never going to get out of the wheel, right? You just keep going. And so, for us, that the transition is really like going, okay, yes, from an individual, this is one thing. And then two, how are we jumping this into a company and sort of starting to go, all right, let's think about this more broadly. And maybe not every person needs an afternoon to think, but man, there's probably a lot of people leading a lot of teams who don't
Yeah,
do that and who should be doing that for themselves and to help support what's happening in their department, their team, etc.
I love that. So how do companies find you to work with you? Because I like what you do is so special is like such a unique specialty. And like you say, like it has to be a company that is interested in this type of culture. So like what are the methods that you use to help people discover that companies like you exist?
So LinkedIn is our sort of big way to find us. LinkedIn, you can find me personally and you can find Compassionate Leader Circle. Our website is compassionateleadercircle.com. And if anyone's interested in following my cooking journey, you can find me at Pink Pineapple Cooking on Instagram or Facebook.
So and actually I really apologize, Meryl. I know that was like really like the very last question, but like I like genuinely curious in terms of like how not like where people like can follow your journey, but like your lead gen like strategies, like what
Yeah. Um, most of it, I mean, LinkedIn's a big one for us. And then honestly, it was about personal networking because people say, oh my gosh, do you know this person, Meryl? For me, I've leveraged a lot of my alumni networks, especially Cornell's network is amazing and very, very responsive. In the hotel school, is like a little special group of humans who feel very strongly about supporting other hotel graduates. We call it the hotel school. It's a business school, but those of us, say, older alums prefer to keep calling it the hotel school. We're never letting that die. So that's like a big connection for me. And then also for me personally and for our business, leveraging my own community is amazing, right? Like I like to be in person with people. I'd rather connect with them in person. We do a lot of hybrid and online work, but I live in an area where there are a lot of businesses, right? There's a lot going on here. And so going to events, being at fundraisers, talking to people, sharing what I'm doing. I mean, it's a very organic, I would say, generation.
yeah, that's cool. Well, and I would imagine that it's those personal connections that really, you almost like you gotta feel out compassion, and it's those personal connections that really breed that. So what's something in terms of first of all, I do have to ask. You left your job because you wanted more time with your family. Are you getting that with what you're doing currently, or has it kind of
I
like sucked
am.
you back in?
Nope, I totally am. I'm home. I get my kids to school every day. I'm home with them when the bus shows up. I'm waving outside, ready for them. And I get that sort of after school time until bedtime with my kids pretty much every day, with the exception of one night that I teach cooking classes. And so for me, my husband is he's a partner at a law firm and he's currently running for a local campaign here in New York. And so he is very busy. And so my job right now is to be the caretaker, right? And so for me, nourishing my kids, feeding them dinner, making sure they have their homework ready, and that when they get home from school, they have some place, something to do, right? Some days it's restful, some days it's a library, some days it's an activity. And I get so much joy knowing that I have my few hours during the day to myself. And then when my kids are home, I'm like the mom. I'm engaged, I'm playing with them, I'm participating in what they're doing. I want to hear them and talk to them. So yeah, I have really made that a priority, and I will continue to do that. It's been extremely rewarding, and I know I won't get these years back with them. So I'm very protective of that time with them.
I love that, and I love that you recognize that it's a window, right? That you're in and recognizing the sweetness of being in that window.
And they like
So
me
what do you
right now. They're the ages they still like me. So I'm like, just soak it up until they don't like me anymore.
That's so funny. How old are your kids?
8, 6, and 4.
Oh, that's such a fun age. They're like they're just so, like, vibrant.
They
So
are,
good.
and there's, like, no diapers and no baby stuff anymore, but they still are, like, growing into these little humans who have
Yeah,
ideas, and they're interested in things, and they tell jokes, and, like, it's just sort of a magical period, I think. So I'm just loving it, loving it.
I love it. That's fantastic. Okay, so what is something with your work that is keeping you up at night? That's like you're like, "Man, if we could just figure this out," or like, "We can't communicate this well enough," or like, what's something that you're really working on right now?
You know, this is sort of a big idea, but I the world around us is not loving and compassionate right now. Really, the sort of political landscape, the leaders sort of in the yes, politics, but also sort of in general right now. There's nobody encouraging sort of loving kindness. And so it's harder to find, I'll say, because right now it's acceptable to not be those things. And so the world is in this place where it's like, it's fine to be rude or mean or offensive or whatever. And there's not a lot of repercussion. And so you're seeing that sort of lead by example, right? People are following that. And it's just sort of the place that we're living in. And that is a huge challenge. And it continues to be something that I would say concerns me, but I worry about because the world is shifting into a place where it's okay to be unkind and to be cruel. And
Mm,
that just feels like it's sort of heartbreaking and I don't know how to fix that. And so I continue to sort of beat my drum and do the best I can with my messaging and what we're doing to shift the way that some people are thinking, right? I can't
yeah.
shift everybody, but if I can get some people to just crack their hearts a little bit wider and let people in a little bit more. Imagine if more people did that, what the world would be like.
Yeah, I love that. So here's a question for you in that vein. Do you think that I mean, I agree, right, that the world is like it's acceptable to be, it's what gets the views and the clicks is to be bombastic, right? And offensive at times. But do you feel like it really is that it's just like that there's more of that? Or is it just that they're louder? Like that like it's harder to hear the compassionate voices and like people actually do want compassion?
Yeah, that is a good question.
And I just want your
I don't
thoughts. I mean, I know you're not like
yeah,
the
no, I
ultimate
don't really
authority
know.
on
No,
universal compassion.
I have surrounded myself with people professionally and personally that are loving and kind humans. And so I see a lot of that and feel a lot of that in my own life. And I really don't have a lot of tolerance for cruelty. Like I'm like, life is too short. I don't want to be a part of that. So I sort of have set my own village around me to be a sort of safe place, I'll call it. But the unkind and cruel is very loud and it's hard to keep it away. It's very loud. So it's probably a little bit of both, right? Of those things. What do you think?
I do think that I like like my circle is intentional, and I personally tend to be the person on social media that like I don't. I'm more of an observer. I'm not much like I'm not commenting on like the rude, crude stuff, but I'm also not commenting on the compassionate stuff either. Like I'm just kind of like I'm more of an observer. But I do think that things that are sensational are rewarded on social media for sure. Like from the algorithm. Like I mean, as a social media person professionally, like the more sensational it is, the more rewarded it is by the algorithm because it has like more attention grabbing capacity. However, I do believe that I think that I also see a desire for a deeper connection with self and with community, for things that are real outside of social media. And I do think that people are seeking for more genuine connections and opportunities feel what's real and feel what's true, you know, and so I do think it's for me, I do think it's a kind of a loud, it's a noise thing more than like a
That makes me happy to hear because loudness we can handle. It's like if people change, that is hard, right? But loudness we can sort of manage.
yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, again, I'm not the ultimate authority on this either, but it's an interesting perspective.
It sure is.
But I love this. Meryl, this has just been an absolutely enriching conversation today with you and just a joy to have you on the show. So I really, really appreciate you coming and sharing your wealth of experience, your heart, your desire to be good and to spread good in the world, and the ways that you're doing it in a nuclear family level, a community level, and a broader level with the compassionate leadership circle that you're involved in. And so, again, thank you so much for sharing everything that you have on the marketing matrix today. So, and one more time, like for people again, like where's the best place to follow the leadership circle, to follow your journey? I don't know if you're posting your garden pics on social or whatever, but like however people can find you.
All of my sort of garden cooking falls under my pink pineapple handle, which is on Instagram and Facebook, and then Compassionate Leader Circle website and LinkedIn is our other best option for Compassionate Leaders Circle and myself as well. So sort of we haven't ventured any further than that. There's only so
I
many
love it.
things I can handle, Lisanne.
Yeah, especially between on the school hours in this season, right?
Totally.
I love it. I
Totally.
love it. Well,
Well,
again,
thank you
Meryl,
so
thank you.
much. I love you. I think you're doing a beautiful job. I'm delighted to be here and looking forward to hearing more of your podcast.
I love it. Well, thanks, Meryl. And again, we'll have to have you back and have another conversation because it was absolutely delightful.
Awesome.
So, guys, wherever you're listening to the Marketing Matrix today, thank you so much. We know that your time is valuable. So, the fact that you've chosen to spend some time with us today, we are just humbly grateful for. So, again, thanks so much for coming and listening to the Marketing Matrix. And until next time.